Thank you, Joel. I want to thank Brad and Evan for bringing me here, and of course Noah, my partner and wife, that without her contribution this would not be happening. When I was about 10 years old, I was captivated by an image in a magazine. It showed a New York skyline as it was changing over time. A 19th century Manhattan profile was flat, rooftops at about 4 or 5 stories high. Tallest buildings were about 2.5 stories high. I have been introduced to the concept that cities, like living organisms, are dynamic. I fell in love with their building blocks, the tall buildings. It changed my life. I want to know all I can about them. I want to be involved in making them. I want to live among them. While design, mainly of tall buildings, have been my passion and all-consuming occupation for 50 years now, I have devoted almost equal time to acquiring intimate knowledge of every discipline that has been part of the phenomena: engineering, manufacturing, construction, and software. When my passion brought me to America, I was so ready that within 3 months, I found myself designing a 100-story office building in the middle of Chicago's Loop. And I was teaching my colleagues with really broken English the ins and outs of the complex, cutting-edge elevatoring systems. In the following decades, as chief of design for Philip Johnson, and later on in my office, I designed landmark buildings that changed the world of tall buildings architecture. My work always had to make sense economically. My designs produced better quality buildings faster and at less cost. I won all my major work through competitions against the best and the brightest. My office was rated the country's most efficient by the trade magazine Corporate Design and Construction. About 15 years ago, the knowledge I've been accumulating both in design and production of buildings, the exponential growth of the urban population in the world, and the huge advances in computing power and sophistication all came together when I realized I can translate what I've been doing, perfecting for years in my designs, one building at a time, into a technology that will enable design architects in the world to use on larger scale and in much improved quality. There was no going back afterwards. Engineered architecture is a platform for fully integrated design, construction, and development of buildings. It comes at a time that the global urban population will double by 2050, and the demand for buildings will increase accordingly. At the same time, the construction industry's productivity continues its over half a century decline, resulting in a rapidly growing gap between supply and demand. So in other words, as global demand for building increases, our capacity to produce them decreases. This is brought to the forefront even more since the global slum population, in purple, which currently amount to 1/3 of the world's urban population, will quadruple in 35 years during the lifetime of most people living today, when 2/3 of the people living in cities around the world will live in slums. That is 2 out of every 3 people. Growth of urban population will require that the entire global building stock that civilization had built since the beginning of time will have to be doubled within the next 35 years. That will require the highest construction spending the world has ever seen. But we know now that the construction industry is not capable of delivering that amount of building. The construction industry is humanity's only arm responsible for providing the entire built environment for people to live and work in. At 1/10 of the world GDP, it is the world largest, larger than all the manufacturing industries combined. The current global building construction market is inching toward $5 trillion a year and is growing exponentially. I learned only last week that by 2025, it is expected to reach $15 trillion. The industry is extremely wasteful and unsustainable. It is the largest consumer of planet resources and energy, the largest generator of the world's solid waste, the largest contributor to greenhouse gases, all around 50%, being the most wasteful and inefficient of all industries. 57 cents of every dollar spent on it is wasted. It irreversibly ravages the environment at an ever-increasing scale. The industry lags in productivity behind all other industries. Contrary to all other industries that show steady increase in productivity, the construction industry has been declining steadily for over half a century. While the industry has produced innovations that improved somewhat its performance, none changed its downward productivity trajectory, and there's no end in sight. Unsustainable and unproductive, in practical terms, the current practice produces buildings that are costly and inefficient, sequential, manual, time-consuming and labor-intensive design, fabrication and construction processes, and in which lack of standardization leads to reinvention, which drives up costs and increase downstream complexity. Design do not adequately consider constructability. Slow design iteration, taking weeks and months, stall decision-making and limits design exploration. Rate of innovation is extremely slow and in a very fragmented market. It's extremely wasteful and unsustainable. BIM, the industry's latest and best hope, should be mentioned here. It might make the design process more efficient, but it doesn't address the core problem. How to create better quality, unique, more sustainable buildings faster and at lower cost. Why is it then that such an awesome industry is in such predicament? Uniqueness. The industry contains one requirement that does not apply to any of the other industries. Buildings, the building blocks of our cities, unlike any manufactured products, cars, airplanes, computers, are required and expected to be unique. All attempts to improve the productivity of their creation through industrialization, such as prefabrication, always resulted in sameness and therefore failure. That is why the only way possible for creating building until now has been reinventing the wheel with each and every building. And that is happening all over the world. The determination of uniqueness in buildings lies at the industry's heart, the architectural design service. A centuries-old anachronistic process that holds the entire industry hostage. This architectural design process has been considered axiomatic and therefore untouchable. EA, engineered architect, will change it. In exploring this design process and how it affects the way we create buildings, I realized that only by raising dramatically the productivity level through automation, while at the same time fully addressing the essential need for uniqueness, will the industry be able to change. As Einstein have said, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. I read an article on the subject not long ago that said that only sweeping technological transformation can turn the construction industry around. I believe strongly that EA is such a transformation. EA is the only solution to address this 21st century challenge, the rapidly growing critical need for urbanization. EA will change the global building industry by dramatically and fundamentally changing the way in which buildings are designed, constructed, and utilized. This diagram shows the current practice, time-cost diagram during design and construction of the typical medium-sized buildings. This graph approximates expenditures over time during the process of creating the building. The process takes 3 years, of which the first year is purely design. After that, there is a period of the intermediate period where there is bidding, negotiations, shop drawings, exchange, etc. It's only at this point where what we call the long lead items could be procured. And these are the elevators, the structure, the curtain wall, items that take long to produce. As I mentioned before, this is the point where the owner, developer gets to know what it's going to total. And then there's obviously the end of the process here, where the building gets into servicing the functions that it was intended. And this is what EA does. It reduces the cost by 30%. Or more. It reduces the time by 30% or more. It brings the critical point of beginning construction in earnest all the way up to here. And I was quite conservative in here, and I'm showing here a month. It could be 2 weeks for pretty complex building. It could be a day for most of the buildings that we see around us today. Okay? The owner knows the cost right from the beginning, okay? And the building begins to serve its purpose 1 year ahead of time. Okay? And that has a lot of implications. For example, one of them is the cost of the building not only reduced because of the efficiency of the system, but the cost of money is reduced very substantially. EA will create superior quality buildings that are 30 to 50% less costly to build, 30 to 60% faster to market, vastly more environmentally sustainable, and of lower life cycle cost. All the while raising the design quality of architecture and urban environment. And when I'm saying better, I mean better in design quality and better in product quality. It provides the technical proficiency to any design. It will open the door to the very talented design architect who by nature are less technically equipped to design the increasingly more technologically complex buildings now that are becoming more and more prevalent and currently for this reason are not trusted to them. So you have a situation where the better designers don't get to do the work that affects us most. EA will open the door to those designers that will be designing buildings, the building blocks of our cities, creating better, more sustainable and livelier urban environments for people to live in. EA will enable the creation of more sustainable design. While most significant step toward the construction industry has ever made, EA provides very simple, easy implementations. No new skills are required. Minimal learning curve, very flat learning curve. These are buildings, famous buildings that were constructed lately by the celebrity architects all over the world. All these remarkable landmark buildings, no matter how creative and unique they are, could have been designed and built utilizing EA, fully enjoying all its benefits. You look around at any building that you see, it can be built, designed and built by EA.